planetary bodies in our solar system. We have Tiamat, we have Malkuth, some is referred to as Milona, I think. We have Nibiru, of course, and Planet X, or the 10th planet. And there's even stories that seem to indicate that our solar system looked a lot different in regards to the distance between the planets, X number of millennia ago and so forth. But, speaking again of the mythologies here, which one have you looked at in regarding to the dark star?
Well, Sitchin's work, Zecharia Sitchin's obviously a firm favourite. He interpreted the writings of the ancient Sumerians and the Babylonians as being literal, that they were writing about gods amongst them, and that the gods came from another planet, and that if you interpret the text in a certain way, it points to being a planet that we're not aware of that's in the solar system. Mm. And the texts that he points at are called the Enuma Elish, which is the creation myth of the Babylonians. As you're saying, it's talking about Marduk, and the planet that's described, or the lord that's described, is described in ways that are clearly sort of reminiscent of a brown dwarf. It's sort of red and fiery and angry, and it uses lightning strikes, and it gets, it gets sort of angry with the other gods or the other planets, and comes hurtling amongst them and causing havoc. And it's very much in keeping with the sort of the scientific scenario that I've been painting with this show. And of course, Zecharia Sitchin's are similar, but Sitchin sort of argues that this planet's a smaller one, that it's not what I would argue as a brown dwarf. He says it's just a regular planet. But that's got problems attached to it in my mind. But as you say, there are other people who've developed these ideas in different directions, and before Sitchin, Immanuel Velikovsky was writing along similar lines. And as you say, he was writing about myths pointing to lots of differences in the solar system, and he sort of advocated the birth of Venus, and he advocated the appearance of a red comet that got so close to Earth that it sort of affected its orbit and affected its tilt and so on, and created catastrophes on this planet. Now, if you see, you're into two phases of thought, they're quite different really, but either of them, you could pick and choose flavours from them and sort of come up with a sort of reasonable theory on this. And it does seem likely to me that the idea of appearance of a sort of an anomalous red star in the sky, that would have a sort of a major effect on our people, the people of this planet, whether it was connected with alien gods who visited us or not. And I suppose Velikovsky would argue, well, it was just it impacted on us through its physical effect. This thing appeared in the sky. It was huge. It affected the Earth. There were great plagues and catastrophes, and our sort of folk memory, our long-term memory as a people, has carried on the stories of this that were eventually wrote down in the Bible and so on. And that it had a catastrophic effect on us, even if there was nothing in the way of life connected with it. And Sitchin would argue, well, this thing appears, it may or may not have a catastrophic effect. That's not nearly as important as the fact that from that world came beings who interacted with us and, in fact, sort of evolved us genetically to the point where we'd sort of be able to stand on our own 2 feet and form civilization and effectively populate the world, as we have done in the last 6,000 years. So, I can go with either of those. Maybe there are aliens on Nibiru, maybe there aren't. It depends on how you want to interpret things. Personally, of the two, I favour Sitchin. I quite like what he has to say. But even if we're not genetically modified monkeys and we did evolve from the apes, and that we've never been visited by aliens at all, there is still the possibility this object appears in the sky, has dramatic effects, and becomes a source of reverence for ancient people. So you can have it both ways, really.
That's right. What about the idea that this planet actually was destroyed? I mean, I've heard different researchers talking about that we can see remnants or evidence for this planet, in the gap between Mars and Jupiter, where the asteroid belt is now. What about that idea?
Well, I mean, Mr. Sitchin sort of goes along that route insofar as he advocates the idea that the Earth was a larger planet that was between Mars and Jupiter, and that it actually got hit by one of the moons of Nibiru, and its orbit was sort of knocked towards the sun. I mean, it's a difficult argument to make. You couldn't make it from the point of view like Velikovsky, where you say, well, that's something that happened recently, because obviously Sitchin's arguing from the point of view of something that happened billions of years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So if we had a folk memory of that, it would have to have been taught to us. It would have to have been the science of the Anunnaki. The gods came to us and they said, hey, this is how the world was made, this is what happened to it, and this is our creation story that we're going to tell you based on our science.
Mm-hmm.
They would have had to have figured out from 4 billion years ago that that's what happened to the Earth.
Mm.
Now, strangely, and as I said before, fact can be stranger than fiction, that there is scientific evidence that actually backs this idea up. Two things back this idea up. One of them is the fact that 3.9 billion years ago, about half a billion years after the start of when the sun came into being, there is evidence on all the surfaces of the planets that there was a massive bombardment of comets, asteroids, what have you. These objects came through the solar system and caused great catastrophe. They were huge, they crashed into the Earth, they crashed into the Moon. Most of the cratering that we see on the Moon occurred during that period, and it's called the Late Great Bombardment. And scientists remain, I think it's fair to say, at a loss to explain why it was that this particular cataclysm occurred so long after the formation of the solar system. The planets formed, they moved around a bit, they bashed about a little bit, and then they would have settled down. And then after a period of having settled down into nice, stable orbits, this comet swarm comes in and causes absolute pandemonium. And of course, Sitchin's work sits very well with this, because he would advocate that what happened was that this rogue planet, this Nibiru, this Marduk, came crashing into the solar system, knocked Earth, and sent comets flying off everywhere. It sent a huge amount of debris flying off everywhere, which was this bombardment. And he also argues that Uranus not knocked over and certain other things like that. It's quite an attractive idea. I mean, it makes sense of a lot of things. There may be other mechanisms that explain it. So that's one of them. And then there's a second thing as well, which is another weird thing, and that is that our Earth has oceans. Now that sounds one of those things. Well, of course our Earth has got oceans. I mean, it's obvious that we've got oceans, but actual fact, we shouldn't have really. Our oceans, our planet formed too close to the sun for the amount of water that is on the surface of this planet to still be here. All the water should have been driven off. There should be effectively a pretty barren world. It shouldn't have all this water. So in order to explain where all the water of the oceans has come from, scientists often argue, it was placed here by, once things cooled down a bit, it was placed here by comets, which are big, sort of balls of ice and rock, crashing into the surface of the Earth, crashing into the atmosphere, and displacing water here. But the problem with that is that the isotopic nature of water, you can analyze it, and it doesn't quite tie up. And there are reasons, scientific reasons, to suspect that our planet actually formed further away from the sun than it is now, cooled down away from the sun so that the heat of the sun couldn't drive off the oceans, and then either migrated here or sort of coalesced from other bodies. So again, science sort of meets this catastrophic and ties us in with it. It's quite interesting, really.
Yeah, very interesting. And, again, I think that ties back to the idea of Tiamat, who released the waters, the mother planet, basically releasing the waters of that planet onto Earth, or our planet, which may have even have caused, there potentially might not have been life on this planet before this actually happened. Who knows?
Yeah. The fossil records of life suggest that life started off before the cataclysm and survived it, which is phenomenal, really. It takes some getting your head round, because this would have been an extremely primitive form of life. It wouldn't have particularly been sort of organisms or what have you. But there are suggestions in the sort of geological record that sort of the processes of life formation began before the catastrophe arrived. And there was another catastrophe earlier on than that as well, where the moon was born from a sort of an object the size of Mars whacking into the Earth, and the moon was sort of Earth material that's thrown up into orbit and sort of coalesced and formed the moon. And these catastrophes, they seem to have been, Earth seems to have ridden them out. But then you come right back down to the discussion of where life comes from. Is life on this planet evolved here and nowhere else? Was it just a pure fluke, or is it something that arrives from outside that sort of seeds all the worlds, and Earth just happened to be sort of ripe for sort of the formation of a varied sort of life? Personally, I think that's probably true. I think even if the Earth started with life, then got crunched, and all of life was eradicated as a result of a massive, cataclysm. Once the Earth sort of got back on its feet, Earth could have been reseeded by comets and started off again. Life could have been reseeded by comets, and life on Earth could have started again. So that's probably, I think, what's probably happened. But who knows? No one knows for sure at the moment.
That's right, but that's absolutely fascinating, and I think that this is a good time to round things off for the first segment here, Andy, and take a little break. But we're going to continue talking in the next segment and go further, into talking about these cycles, and if this potentially is something that is recurring, coming back. Talk a little bit about the future, of course. 2012 is their connection with the end of the Mayan calendar. There's much more fascinating stuff to talk about here, but before we break this segment, tell people about your website and how people can get your book, Dark Star.
My website's been running since 1999, so it's sort of well-established website, and it's very easy to find because you can just Google my name, Andy Lloyd, or Dark Star Theory, and you'll find it. It's sort of very well established in that way. But if you want the web address, it's www.darkstar, all one word, the number 1, so it's darkstar1.co.uk, and quite a simple web address. My book was published in 2005 by the Timeless Voyager Press in California, and it's available through Amazon.com. And again, a search on Amazon for Andy Lloyd will bring the book up, no problem at all. Or it's available through me, and details are on the website. And obviously, people in Europe who want to get hold of the book, it's just as easy to get it from me in the UK as it is to order it from Amazon.com over in the States. So that's how you can get hold of the book, and the book is full of scientific evidence and material, but also it's full of lots of conjecture, and it discusses about Sitchin a lot, and it discusses about Planet X in all kinds of ways, and you'll find lots of fascinating stuff. A lot of people read it and really enjoyed it, so it's a good read.
Absolutely, and head on over right away to that website. As I said in the introduction, there's lots of material on there to read and